Some relationships aren't meant to last. This is actually okay. Some relationships aren't meant to last, and that doesn't mean that you've failed. It doesn't mean that you didn't try hard enough. It doesn't mean that you're disloyal or selfish. Sometimes it simply means the relationship has become unhealthy. In this video today, I want to help you understand why some relationships quietly drain us and how to discern what's worth preserving and what might need to change. If we haven't met, my name is Andrew, and for nearly 30 years, I've had the pleasure of helping people to get unstuck, get growing, and live the kind of life they want to live. Most people don't realize that they're living with a learned, diminished version of their true self. When you discover that there's a true you on the inside and you start living that way, you will absolutely love your life. Let's talk for a moment about why most relationships in life can feel beautiful and hard at the same time. We've got to understand that relationships can be and should be rewarding. But at the very same time, by nature, they are also challenging. And until you understand this and accept this, you can get really thrown off by that. We love the rewarding part of relationships and we want that in our life because without them, life would feel empty and meaningless. But the truth is that relationships can also be the most challenging and stressful part of our human experience. And this tension exists in every close relationship. Spouses, parents, children, friendships, work colleagues. It's everywhere and it's actually normal. The difference between relationships that nourish us and those that drain us often comes down to a few key traits. You know, I think about the example of my own parenting journey. I have 2 children and I love my kids almost more than the breath in my own lungs. I adore them. I'm proud of them. I love them. And yet at the same time, these 2 humans that I literally would do anything for. I would lay my life down for them, and yet still they can have moments that utterly frustrate me and irritate me. And it's that tension that exists in nearly every relationship that we're going to have in life. We need to become okay with the fact that these 2 worlds exist in every kind of relationship. Let's talk about something in our relationships that really matter a whole lot. That is the existence of patterns. In every relationship that you'll experience in life, if you're paying attention, you will be able to observe that relationships over time will reveal consistent patterns. And those patterns will determine whether a relationship feels safe and rewarding, or maybe it feels heavy and damaging. That's why discernment matters. You see, not every relationship deserves equal access to your inner life. We all have a variety of relationships. We have close ones, we have semi-close ones, we have people in our life that are just acquaintances, and we have total strangers. It's so important that you understand not every relationship deserves the same level of attention or focus as others. And it's important that the closer people get to you in relationship, you're watching the patterns in their life and who they are so that you can establish whether that relationship will be healthy and fruitful for the long term. So the difficult truth about some relationships is that they are actually difficult and, as much as we don't like to say it, destructive. We like to hope and believe that all relationships can be healthy and helpful. But the truth is, there are some relationships that are more like this than they are healthy. And even our good relationships can have difficult seasons. However, there is a difference between relationships that are hard versus relationships that are destructive. It's so important that we understand that difficulty is not always destruction, because when destruction comes into our relationships, we've got to make a change. Otherwise, we're going to experience damage. One of the things that we have to learn to do if we're going to get better at relationship selection and management is we've got to understand some of the observable traits of difficult and damaging relationships. So let's talk about some of the draining traits that go on in friendships, even in families and in work situations. Number one, dishonesty. When you're dealing with a relationship that doesn't have trust in it because there's dishonesty, nothing good is going to come from that. Number two, manipulation. This one here I could talk about for hours. And in fact, I have made this an entire module in my mentoring and training program because so many people in today's world are the victims of manipulative relationships. It's severely damaging and causes so many problems for so many people. Manipulation is a highly draining trait. Number three, when you have a relationship with someone and they are self-serving, always putting themselves first, putting you last. It's draining to be in a relationship like that. Number four, emotionally unavailable. Very sadly, a lot of children go through this experience in their younger years where a parent or maybe both parents are emotionally unavailable. They might be physically there, but not there to make an emotional connection, and it's severely draining on the other person's life when their relationship is with someone who's not available emotionally. Number five, one-sided effort. I don't know if you've ever played in a sports team where you've got lazy team members who will not pull their weight. It's so frustrating. The same is true in relationships where only one person is doing the heavy lifting. Number six, volatility, or another word that we could use there is unpredictability. In other words, you can't count on how this person is actually going to behave in certain situations, and they're making you guess about how they're going to respond. Let's go to the next one. A lack of forgiveness. Again, this is a whole subject all in itself, but when things go wrong in relationships, as they do, you sometimes need forgiveness to play a part in mending the relationship and continuing the relationship. But when people, by default, hold grudges and won't release forgiveness, incredibly draining. When these kinds of traits dominate a relationship, the cost to your inner life is massive. You can't afford to keep living your life with these kinds of traits in relationships, or the price that you will pay is way too high. Having worked in this space for nearly 30 years, I've seen so many examples of these kinds of traits in relationships. What I'm about to share might actually be difficult for some of you to listen to, but I want you to stay all the way to the end because I'm going to talk about some healthy traits that you can be on the lookout for. One of the most damaging things that I've ever seen in relationships is when a person becomes the victim of a manipulative relationship with someone else. Typically what goes on there most of the time is that a person who becomes a manipulator, and I'm talking about a really willful, hurtful, destructive manipulator, when that person is young, something goes wrong of a traumatic nature. Maybe they go through a major health episode. Maybe there's a family breakdown. Maybe there's some kind of abuse that they're subject to as a young child. And what happens in their soul is they actually understand at a subconscious level that something on the inside got broken and breached. And they understand that they've experienced a loss of power and a loss of agency that shouldn't have happened. And so out of an immature reaction, what they do is they decide that they can't afford to risk that happening again, and so they must take control of their situation. This is often how we see people end up with eating disorders or all kinds of destructive and errant ways of relating to people, behavioural issues, all kinds of things. But when this person decides that they need to control their world, usually they overreach and they can end up becoming a very, very demanding, manipulative person to relate to, and they're doing it out of protection of themselves. However, by nature of them becoming domineering and manipulative and controlling, like a moth to a flame, they seem to be able to find their way into relationships with people who are much more fragile, much weaker in their personality, much more accommodating, people who are willing to do anything to please the other, those who might have acceptance issues, security issues, approval issues, needs for affirmation. And when you pair these two people together, the manipulator gets more powerful, the vulnerable person gets weaker, and you can end up with a horrendous and horrific example of seriously unhealthy and destructive relationships. You might have experienced that in your own life, and if you have, I really would love to help you. You would be well advised to click on the link in the show notes below, check out my training program, the True Self Transformation Program, because in that course, I spend an entire module on escaping manipulative relationships and establishing healthy boundaries. It might just be the thing that changes your life forever. Why don't you check that out? Most of the damage that happens in relationships of this nature tends to be quiet damage. It's not often dramatic, but it's the kind of stuff that erodes a person's confidence. It drains their emotional energy. It leaves them second-guessing themselves. And because that damage is quite subtle and quiet, people stay far longer than they should in certain relationships. The difficult but essential reality is that there are certain relationships and certain people that you actually need to avoid at all costs. You see, avoiding destructive relationships isn't harsh, it's protective. Your inner life cannot thrive in environments marked by manipulation, unpredictability, and emotional absence. You must give yourself permission to say no to those relationships, whatever the price. After all of that discussion, it's vital that we spend a few moments talking about life-giving traits, because healthy relationships feel completely different. Let's talk about some of those traits now. Number one, a life-giving relationship is encouraging. In other words, you feel good being around that person. They actually encourage you in who you are and what you're doing. Number two, generous. You want to be in relationship with people who will share with you, who will give to you, who will live on a two-way street in those things with you and not be a selfish taker. Number three, life-giving trait in a good relationship is kindness. One of the greatest commodities in the world today that's lacking is when people experience kindness, especially if it's uninvited or undeserved or unexpected. To experience kindness is one of the greatest joys of the human experience. In contrast to our other list, in a good relationship, the other person is emotionally available. One of the greatest things that you can have in any relationship is when the other party is willing and ready to connect with you on an emotional level. Without that connection, very hard to build a healthy relationship. Here we go for another important one. Number five, it's built on shared joy and grief. Sounds like a funny one, but so important. A healthy relationship actually celebrates when you win, and it carries a load with you when you've had a loss. Shared joy and shared grief is so important. Number six, and again in contrast to our other list, predictable. You want to have relationships with people where you kind of already know how they're going to respond to certain situations and you don't have to walk on eggshells around them all the time. Let me give you two more. Number 7, forgiving. We all make mistakes. We all get things wrong. What's a great gift in life is when the person that you're in relationship with can say the words, "I forgive you." This heals and changes so many things, and you want relationship with people like that. Let me give you one more. Sadly, another rare commodity in today's world, humble. We don't see much humility anymore because people are trying to show off their best all the time and look better than others. But when you find a humble person, there's a relationship that you want to hang on to, because those kinds of relationships don't drain you. They actually have the power to strengthen you. In healthy relationships, effort flows both ways. You're not constantly proving your worth, and you're not walking on eggshells. You're not carrying the relationship alone. There's mutual care, mutual respect, and mutual responsibility. We have to have discernment and support in our relationships. And sometimes what we really need is an outside perspective, because sometimes it gets hard to see clearly from the inside. And that's why trusted friends really matter. People who know you well and want the best for you can help you to assess the nature of the relationships in your life. Sometimes extra support is needed, especially if you feel trapped in a dynamic that's really destructive. Reaching out for help is not actually weakness. As I mentioned earlier in the episode, for many of you, you will have heard something today that makes you think, I actually need more help with this. And if that's the case, I would love for you to click on the link in the show notes below. Go and have a watch of my free preview lesson in the True Self Transformation Program. That whole course is full of so much help, so much transformative power to change the true identity of who you are and to help you attract relationships into your life that will bring the life-giving traits and not the draining, destructive traits that you might have gotten used to. Thanks for being here in this episode today. I hope you heard something that was useful and helpful to you, and I'll see you in another video real soon.